Welcome back to the fourth in this series of looking at does God exist or is there a God? And we're looking at the beginning of this concept of genetics. Some of this material we've looked at a little bit before in the complexity of life. It's worth going over again because it's worth being reminding of ourselves of the complexity of life anyway. We're looking overall at these ideas here, the cause and effect, the cosmological argument. It's the most reasonable cause for a material universe, that something bigger than us, intelligence, has created us. The order of the universe. There's a dramatic organization, despite it claims the opposite of a huge big bang, an explosion somewhere, and then coming out into some sort of complexity. Usually any kind of explosion ends up in the opposite, creating chaos almost. The irreducible complexity of living things, most reasonable cause of life and its complexities. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. The human body, the more we understand about it, the more we understand how it works, and down into DNA and RNA, and the complexity of the chemical systems that work around our body, are just it's absolutely amazing. And really, the more you understand about it, the more it blows your mind how complex it is. Another argument is the idea of ethics and reason. We are thinking beings, but more than thinking beings, we are conscious of ourselves, of those around us, and also, to a degree, conscious of there must be something out there. And therefore, when we get to that point, we find ourselves being worshipful, or worshipping in one way, shape or form. And that's true of the majority of people on earth. Even those who are atheists end up worshipping themselves, or those around them as being those that are worthy of listening to and following and worshipping. And to a degree, even our football systems have taken the place of God. Our football players become the idols that men and women seem to be willing to throw themselves at, and to spend a lot of money to support. And then there's obviously the religion itself. Throughout most of the world and throughout most of history, there has been an awareness of worshipping, a willingness to worship something. In some cases, maybe just be a tree. In the old Egyptian situation, it was the river. The Nile and the crocodiles, or all sorts of stuff. The sun has been popular down through time. So there's the essence of religion, man's desire to worship something, to seek after something. There must be more than this, and therefore the place the Bible will play in those things. Remind yourself of the complexity. Evolution would say that if you had an explosion in the Home Depot department, once the smoke began to clear, that explosion would end up with something complex, far more complex than you would imagine from an explosion. And this is just not true. It's just not the way the universe works. Evolution has taught something from nothing, simple to complex, goes against every known accepted scientific law. The alternative, obviously, if or the evolutionists say, if you have enough time, then there's the probability, the chance that life might develop. Now, they've been trying to do this for as long as I can remember, and certainly in generations before me. They thought that they would find the answers on the moon. It weren't there. They found more questions. So they thought they'd move on to Mars, that the answer of where we come from would be found in Mars. Again, we found more questions than answers. Then they went on to the comets, and again they found more questions than answers. And now they're still doing a search out in the wide atmosphere or stratosphere of the multi-million universes out there, looking for life. And even Dawkins, in one of his programs, he talked in terms of alien life, that no way that life could come into existence on Earth, but therefore it must have been brought to Earth from somewhere else. But really that just extends the question of, well, where did that life come from? And that's the problem they still have. So really, when we ask ourselves a question about the origin of life, we see the complexity, especially since about 1996, or since Mr. Crick came along and with the help of the lady that you hardly ever hear about, with her background and his friend, finding the helix of life, the DNA and the RNA, and all the interdependence of these things. Now, it actually is a programmed system. You can break into the system at any particular part, and you can take that part of that system and you can produce a pig, you can produce a cow, you can produce a human being or a mammoth. We have the people busy in the laboratory spending millions of dollars trying to dissect the helix and to try and mess about with the information that they find within there. But the evolution would say the information just happened by chance, and yet it's so complex, it is so wound and bound together that really you can see just like a computer doesn't work by itself, especially doesn't work by an explosion in some factory. Somebody has programmed the software into our computers that we use on a day-to-day basis. We understand that. We understand that behind the programs that we use and take for granted that there's someone who has spent a vast amount of time programming that software into there to make it efficient and do exactly what they wanted to do. And every company, for example, Microsoft, are constantly updating their programs to make it more friendly. Apple are constantly working on the programs to try and make them more efficient and so they break down less. These programmers understand the complexity of the information required, even though they're just dealing with simple on-off switches, but the complexity required to write a program that makes it look so simple. In our film world, our television world at the moment, the CGI and all the stuff that's being developed for that you can't tell truth from fiction almost. Everything is so real. But that didn't happen by accident. The men with well, not in the case of software programmers, they don't usually wear white coats, but certainly individuals, very talented individuals in the IT world, have spent hours and hours and hours and thousands, if not millions of pounds and dollars have been spent in order to bring about this almost seamless graphics that we're becoming so used to in the films that we watch and in the television that we see. But it doesn't happen by itself. There is design, purpose, men's efforts, men's time and ladies' times spent in trying to achieve what looks to us very simple as an end product. And that's the reality with the DNA and the RNA. It looks simple. The job it does looks simple. And yet the complexity found within it is absolutely mind-blowing. And we as human beings at the moment don't come anywhere near the technical expertise that is found in the simple DNA and RNA protein strings. DNA stores the genetic information and then copies it to RNA. RNA directs the synthesis of the proteins. Proteins carry out the work essential to cell existence and reproduction. And it's almost seamless. We breathe without thinking about it. Our heart beats without our waking up in the morning and starting it off. Practically everything about our human body works almost autonomously. And we as human beings have very little input into that. As long as we stoke the fire, i.e. we eat, and as long as we go to the toilet to get rid of the waste, everything else is outside our control. It's built into the system, and it's a complex system. And the more we understand about it, the more we understand if there is a God, wow, he is super intelligent, able to make something so super complex. But the complexities are there. The one behind it is far more complex than the complexity that we see. Every living cell contains DNA, the program which describes every aspect of the organism's physical design and life functions, including all these different things here we looked at the other week. A cell would not really be alive or survive unless all life's functions became operable at once. So how did even a simple single-celled organism evolve? And the very use of that word, simple single cell, is an oxymoron, because there's no such thing as a simple cell. Remember the illustration I used about the baby and the umbilical cord and coming off one feeding system and moving into another feeding system, how one valve opens and one valve closes to make that possible. And the question was asked, how many million years could it take to develop something like that? You can't get millions of years into that. It either works or it doesn't work. Miller's experiment from many years ago is still, almost amazingly, would you believe, still being promulgated today, even though it's been proven to be false so long ago. Just recently, in one of the programs, there's an astrophysicist, a lady, and she had a half-hour show where part of that show was seeing her with a colleague on a beach, and they tried to replicate or try to. That's not really fair because they didn't really do much, but they implied that they were replicating the chemical transition that Miller demonstrated and failed really to produce life in a test tube so long ago. But they were looking at the basics of life, and they didn't even get anywhere near it. But the implication was, here's a very clever lady, very well respected lady, and she's throwing her whole respectability into promoting the concept of evolution. So is the theory of evolution good science? Well, much of the science that we get pushed at us as for evolution, it just doesn't work. Science can't answer the big questions of life, where we come, the question of origin, because science is a provable thing. You can demonstrate it. And sadly, that lady at the beach that day failed to demonstrate, just as Miller failed to demonstrate in his time, how you can get life out of these simple chemicals that were found. We're not dealing really with science, we're dealing with philosophy. The concept of the origins of life is outside of science. It's not able to be reproduced as science should be within its remit. This is outside of science. We're in the realm of philosophy. We're in the realm of belief. We're in the realm of religion. And so that's why atheism can truly safely be called a religion. It's a body of faith. We look at the same as a Christian. An atheist looks exactly the same facts. It's how we interpret those facts that make a difference. I believe one thing, an atheist believes something else, but neither of us could prove it under scientific analysis, because the concept, the project that we're dealing with is outside of science. When we talk about origins, we weren't there, and so we depend on other things to help us to look at what is more reasonable. What is more reasonable, an option, a conclusion we can come to. And I believe that the religious faith, as found in a Christian religion faith, is far more believable than any of the atheistic evolutionary systems that have been put forward so far. The theory of evolution is really the backbone of modern biology, or in the backbone of modern biology, because biology is in a very peculiar position of being a science founded on an unproven theory. Is it then a science or a faith? The reality is that much of what is put forward as biology from outside of the test tube in the science laboratory is actually a theory, an unproved theory. And many of the biological textbooks, biology textbooks and other textbooks dealing with these areas are all in the realm of speculation, and they're all in the realm of basically stuff that's being changed practically every 10 years. Every 10 years or so you have a newspaper headline comes up with evolution will have to be rewritten, the history of evolution will have to be rewritten. We found something else that changes everything. And that was no more true than after Crick's discovery of the of the DNA and RNA, one science gentleman, put forward the idea that everything that had been taught up to 1996 was absolutely now thrown in the dustbin. Okay, we've got a brand new ball game. That was when Professor Flew, who had been all these years an anti-religious debater, suddenly realized this just doesn't make sense. This is far too complex. There must be something behind it. There must be intelligence behind it. And therefore, before he died, he changed from being a person against the religious idea of concept of intelligence and became a believer before he died. Belief in the theory of evolution is thus exactly parallel to belief in special creation. Both are concepts which believers know to be true, but neither up to the present has really been capable of proof. L.L. Harrison and Matthews introducing the origin of species quoted in the revised code book. 17 million years ago, DNA. DNA is sequenced from a magnolia leaf deposited in clay on the bottom of a lake in northern Idaho some 17 million years ago. They said they were able to amplify a fragment as long as 800 base pairs. The clay was wet, however, and one wonders how DNA could have survived the damaging influence of water for so long. Now, this is really contrary to the evolutionists' ethos, because DNA, by its very nature, should not be able to survive millions of years. Okay, and yet, when they picked up this magnolia leaf, and when they claimed it was so many 70 million years old, they were actually claiming something both for the leaf and for the DNA that just should not happen, because the DNA should have been long, long gone before any 70 million years. How about 40 million years old DNA? Kano, a microbiologist at California State Polytechnic University, dissected a Dominican stingless bee, trapped, he claimed, between 25 and 40 million year old amber. He said he found bacterial spores. That's a dormant state of bacteria. He'd grown them and analysed some other DNA and found it closely matched exactly the same bacteria found in modern Dominican bees. Well, surprise, surprise. Okay, so the first part of the section, they found a stingless bee, and they claimed the stingless bee was 25 to 40 million years old, but they found trapped within the amber also the bacterial spores, and these bacterial spores actually were just like the spores you find today in a modern Dominican bee. Now, so whether the actual thing that they found is 25 to 40 million years old, that's their faith. That's their interpretation of their finding. But the reality was there wasn't that much difference in 40 million years, because the same bacteria is still found in the same bees, similar bees today. Scientists recovered T-Rex, Tyrannosaurus Rex soft tissue. This is another almost mind-blowing situation, okay? They found the soft tissue, which is not such a big problem in the permafrost. It can happens with mammoths to find soft tissue, but DNA and preserved in the blood vessels 70 million years old. DNA should be long gone. There are certain physical limits that seem almost inescapable. In approximately 50,000 years, water alone strips bases from DNA. Oxygen also contributes to the destruction of DNA. Even in ideal conditions, in the absence of water and oxygen at low temperature, background radiation must finally erase all genetic information, the Scientific American says. So this is talking about 50,000 years. This is not talking about 1 million years. This is not talking about 17 million years. This is not talking about 40 million years. This, these scientists are saying the DNA should be destroyed, it should be eliminated, it should no longer be anywhere present up to 50,000 years maximum, if you will. Another really quite favourite when I was, a matter of fact, when I was an evolutionist, I used Mr. Haeckel's ontology recapitulates philology because basically I was ignorant. I was an atheist and I could read this in my Encyclopedia Britannica and I took it as fact. I could go in my biology textbooks and it was there being taught as a fact. And I thought I was pretty smart. I could take on these religious people and show them a thing or two using Mr. Haeckel's ontology recapitulates philology. Matter of fact, the very fact you can say it makes you sound clever. The development, it's the development of an embryo. That's ontology, and it's speeded up as a replay of the evolution in the species, and that's phylogeny. In other words, a human embryo passes through various stages during the 9 months in the womb. You can see in the embryo as it goes through these different parts, the invertebrate, a fish, an amphibian, a reptile, a mammal, a primate, an ape, and a man are all there, according to Mr. Haeckel, in the womb, pictures of the womb. What they used to do was when a child would die, they would dissect the child and they would look and see what they could learn from the child. So here's Mr. Haeckel's original pictures. Obviously somebody had a Kodak at the time, but now these are the things that appear in the Encyclopedia Britannica. They appear in your biological textbooks right up to 1980, I think the late 80s, 1980s. You could still get textbooks, biology textbooks, that had this in it. Now the value of it was it's such a simple thing, visual thing that shows human development, but human development from the every evolutionary stage. You can see in the bottom part there, he says he's got a fish, he's got a salamander, he's got a tortoise, he's got chicken, he's got pig, he's got calf, he's got rabbit, and then ultimately you've got man, okay? Now, he was quite a gentleman. He was a university lecturer, and all his fellow professors were very, very much impressed by what he'd found. And they spent the next 5 to 10 years dissecting children who had died and looking to see where they could see what Haeckel said that he saw. So this theory was very, very popular. The theory developed, it was a fascinating concept, but the problem is, it's not a law, it is totally untrue. And actually within the lifetime of Haeckel, well actually within the first 10 years of Haeckel, his university people took him to task and basically asked him where he found these all these things in here, because they couldn't find what he was finding. And he had to admit that actually he just made it all up. So it was rejected by biologists around the 1900s as something that was untrue. Nevertheless, it had become embedded in many courses and textbooks, and it continues to be taught up in the 1980s anyway, late 1980s. Haeckel was brought before a panel of his peer scientists, and he was forced to admit he had falsified all his drawings in order to distort the facts. It made his name. We don't know that, well, I don't know it certainly, the name of his peer scientists. I know of Haeckel because of this drawing. So he has made an impact. He has made an impact on history, if you will. But it's an impact based upon fraudulent use of information. Even today, you can find these drawings put forward as facts in many biological textbooks and articles to prove the fact of evolution. The Encyclopedia Britannica actually withdrew it, or I think they still got it in there, but now they tell you it's actually false information. Google it. Natural selection at work. Okay, this is a picture made popular by a BBC program, and showing the evolution of human development of an individual from the early cavemen, the ape men, all the way up to the human being. And there's two observations. Every organism produces more offspring than will survive, and there's a great amount of variation between individuals. Survival of the fittest is not necessarily survival of the strongest, because obviously those things out there willing to take down some of the species, they will take out the strong as well as the weak, and so it doesn't always work. But the principle quite often is there that the fittest should survive. There's a biological classification system for all sorts of stuff, and it helps us to understand the complexity of the different species, as well as the narrowness of the different species. You find this in animals, you find it in the garden with all the plants and stuff. There's classifications for all sorts of stuff, and the real problem for evolution is that what they're asking is for you to, for example, turn this dog eventually, or given enough time, into a cat. Or no, I would go further. I would say I would want to look at turning a dog into an elephant, because I know that definitely doesn't happen. But we've done some great stuff in the laboratory, costing a lot of money. Men in white coats have actually crossbred lots of different things, but they wouldn't be crossbred in nature. They just wouldn't survive in nature. Mr. Darwin obviously was really impressed when he saw the different beaks and sizes on the birds, which led him really to highlight the idea of variation within the species. The problem was that he didn't keep it within the species. He actually then wanted to posit the idea that it could be outside of the species. So he didn't stick with a bird, but stay on birds and all sorts of different types of birds. He wanted to overstep the boundary and turn the bird into something totally different. And that's where the problem lies. That's our argument with evolution in general. They want to outstep the boundaries that we can see as in the world, and make some rash statements. And we'll see that as this develops. I'll remind you what we said before. He didn't find any elephants on the island that had been developed from the finches. His argument probably would be, well, it just wasn't enough time. But that he didn't find any chickens either. Evolution says fish can develop into birds and elephants given enough time. And that's the truth. You may think I'm lying about that, okay? But that's not a lie. That's a true statement. They have claimed in time past that fish can develop into birds and elephants, and the real criteria, given enough time. Okay. When Darwin discovered this, he really took it too far. The Bible, on the other hand, says fish can develop into different types of fish, varieties of fish. Birds can develop into different varieties of birds. Elephants can develop into different varieties of elephants, and we see that time after time after time. Okay, I know we're very clever as human beings. As I say, I know of one experiment in the last 20-30 years. They actually made a cat rab. They crossed the genetics from a cat and a rabbit, and so it would hop into the room and then say meow. And they have in the cat world, they had tigers and lions, a light tag. And they've done all sorts of strange things to try and show this cross-referencing thing. But the thing that they forget to tell you about all that, it didn't happen by chance. It was men in white lab coats with lots of money being spent on them over a number of years that were able to develop these experiments. They're getting faster at it, as the more they understand about the DNA and RNA and the way they can chop bits about. They'll be able to do that faster and faster and faster. But the reality is, it's a human. They are the human beings playing God. They are the intelligence behind these strange mixes of cross species, and yet it just doesn't happen in nature. Here was one that was used to be really popular when I was an evolutionist, okay? It described the progression of a horse. All right, they said there was a small three-toed animal, though larger animals with progressively larger hooves developed from the middle toe. Darwin thought Marsh's sequence from little Eohippus, as it was called, dawn horse, to the modern Equus was the best evolutionary demonstration anybody had produced in the 15 years since the origin of species. So here we have the tree, if you will, of a horse and the different developments that occur over time. And there's your long times required for these changes to take place. And Darwin was quite impressed with this picture. It even ended up in the British Museum. Marsh arranged his fossils to lead up to the one surviving species, blindly ignoring many inconsistencies and contradictory evidence. But you could take a trip around the Natural History Museum and you could see this lined up really nicely. It's an excellent illustration of evolution at work, isn't it? On the right hand side you have the small horse, then the bigger horse, a slightly different development, and then up again and up again until you have the modern horse that we know and love. The exhibit now is hidden from public view as an outdated embarrassment. Now I can say with embarrassment, I used this illustration against religious people. I made a mockery of their religion because obviously we have evolved, and this is one of the best arguments, along with Mr. Haeckel's argument, to prove that evolution was this progression, just given enough time. This gentleman, he's trying to tread nicely and gently, okay? He wants to critique, he wants to even criticize, but he really doesn't want to be open in his criticism. He says, please note I have not only tried to present scientific facts from the recent developments in biology, I have tried not to criticize. Okay? Adaptive changes can't explain anything about the macroevolution because we do not have a scientifically verifiable relationship between microevolution, that's adaptation, that's change within a species, and macroevolution, that is the development of complex organs. In other words, that is your dog eventually turning into a horse or an elephant, okay? Outside its species, total change. Macroevolution is a total change from microevolution, which is adaptation and change, variation within a species. Now he says, we cannot comment at present on the mammal family tree because it is contentious. Okay, he doesn't want to step on anybody's toes. It is still rapidly evolving subjective evolution in the minds of biologists and geologists. You can read an interesting article if you want in the refined, fine-tuned placental mammal family tree, but he doesn't want to get his nose put out of joint, and he doesn't want to put anybody else's nose. He wants to keep his job, in other words. And he says that explains the concocted tree from the molecular data is not in agreement with the tree erected based on anatomical data. Okay, he's saying what is a concocted, what you find in the Encyclopedia Britannica, what you find in the biology textbooks about the family tree is a concocted tree and just doesn't fit the reality of what they now know about the human body. Here is one of the articles that one of the pictures he uses. All right, he shows on one side a family tree based on times past, and then he shows a reshuffled family tree in 1992 and 2009. So he's not even contrasting here with Darwin in his family tree or his evolutionary tree earlier. This is a modified Darwin 1992. and now it's remodified by these gentlemen in 2009. Okay, and even there, what they're trying to do is shuffle stuff around to make it fit, because it doesn't fit the genealogical, the normal tree. And so they're trying to restructure the trees. Instead of understanding it, they're trying to make stuff fit that doesn't fit. These animals, supposed to be reproduced one from another, are seen to be an imaginary connection, changing all the time. Darwin's tree of life, which shows how species are related through evolutionary history, is wrong, they say, and it needs to be replaced, they say, according to leading scientists of today. And that's interesting. This is around the time, the one left is around the time that DNA is about to be really making a huge impact in the world. And obviously they've already moved into some of it, and by the time that comes along. Here's a description of whale evolution, okay? It's really a study in deception. Biology visualizing life. So they have all these things in here. These are all imaginary things, really. Imaginary links they've made. They say this thing comes from that thing, which comes from that thing, which comes from this thing, and now it's this thing, okay? Mesonichilds are the hypothesized, remember that's a good word, isn't it? Hypothesis, that means made up link between modern whales and hoofed mammals. This second one apparently walked in land in a manner similar to modern sea lions. It swam by flexing his backbone and paddling with his hind limbs. The third one down, he spent little time on land. Its reduced hind limbs could not have aided in walking or swimming. And then modern whales have forelimbs that are flippers, not hind limbs, no hind limbs, and tiny non-functional pelvis, okay? So what are really part of this hypothesis, or these visual links that they've made up. For instance, modern whales are the descendants. Now listen to this, okay? Just hang in there. Modern whales are the descendants of four-legged land animals that are also the ancestors of horses and cows. All right, so they would say that everything came out of the sea, came out to land, and then moved on. But part of the history of this evolutionary thought is the stuff came out of the sea, they went into land, maybe got fed up in the land, maybe didn't like the food or whatever, and decided to go back into the sea. And then come back up again and produced other stuff, okay? Let me read that again just so you get it right. For instance, modern whales are the descendants of four-legged land animals. Okay, as you can see in figure 10.4, fossils intermediates between modern whales and their 60 million year old ancestors reveal a history of slow transformation. Perhaps it was a case that maybe as the whales, the land animals, went back into the sea, perhaps other little fish come along and started eating up maybe their hooves or whatever, and so much so that they ended up just as flippers. All the rest have been eaten away. Perhaps that's what's happened over time. Maybe a shark came along occasionally and helped the process, speed the process up. Okay, that's just this is what they call science. All right, this is evolution in action. This is what evolution is trying to tell you that actually happened. That's obviously, these pictures are drawn by an artist. It's not what was actually found. Archaeopteryx, fully formed feathers, patching feet, feathered wings, bird-type skull, furcula claws on the wing. Not unique. We know of other birds like this today. It's a fossil that has feathers like a bird, but a skeleton of a small dinosaur. They claim it's one of those missing links that actually is not missing anymore. they claim that this bird lived 150 million years ago. Now, the 150 million years is just pure speculation, okay? There's a nice little chart made up, and you've got to fit in the chart. If you find a stone, you look at the fossils around the stone, that tells you the age of the stone. Then you look at the fossils again, and you look at the stones around the fossils, and that tells you the age of the fossil. So it's a circular thing to match a chart that two men made up. That's where you get all these 150, 450, or whatever million years, okay? It's a man-made up chart that they're all meant to fit into. It doesn't work anywhere on Earth. There's only about 4 places on Earth where any 4 of them actually on the geological table actually come together the way the charts say. But anyway, a bird lived 150 million years ago, had many reptilian characteristics, was discovered in 1861, and helped support the hypothesis of evolution proposed by Charles Darwin in his Origin of Species. Unfortunately, new research shows that birds lack the embryonic thumb that dinosaurs had, suggesting that it's almost impossible for the species to be closely related. 1998. Matter of fact, is a good quote. It says, "Dino bird evolution falls flat." Okay. This is a picture. It's magnified 80 times, and it shows you the contrast and details. And the upper picture is a feather, and the lower picture is scales. Okay, both magnified to the same amount, but you can see there's absolutely no comparison between a bird's wing and the scales on anything. At the morphological level, feathers are traditionally considered homologous with reptilian scales. Basically, they're saying that at the morphological level, birds look like reptiles. Bird feathers look like reptiles. But in actual fact, that just doesn't work out that way. The development morphogenesis, the shape from form generationally, gene structure, protein shapes, and sequence and filament formation and structure, feathers are different. Matter of fact, feathers are totally different. This must drive evolutionists mad, okay? Trifling particulars of structure often make me very uncomfortable. The sight of a feather in a peacock's tail, whenever I gaze it, makes me sick. I wonder who said that. Charles Darwin said that in a letter to Asa Gray, okay? He says, this peacock just doesn't fit anything that I want to fit. Do change within species prove evolution? We can see the many experiments done. A mule shows the sterility edge. Many experiments are done with fruit flies because of the fast reproduction cycle. What happened? 2 things happened. The mutant flies either died over a period of generations, or they come back to the original normal conditions. They couldn't be changed. They were frozen, steamed, blinded by light and darkness, and fired with X-rays, and they still stayed flies. They didn't even turn into a bumblebee. Okay? What about genetic the potential for change is limited. Mutations are rare, usually random, and usually harmful. Apparently, just this recently, some children in some countries are being born without wisdom teeth. They no longer have wisdom teeth, and that's actually a mutation. But it's not. It's a harm. You know, at one time when I was young, they used to whip out wisdom teeth. And then they realised they shouldn't do that because wisdom teeth did a good job. Now here are actual children, with all the chemicals we stuff in kids today, the children are being mutated and they're losing their wisdom teeth. Now, for evolution to be true, they should be developing more wisdom teeth to make them wiser. In actual fact, they're losing their teeth, and that's a genetic malfunction. And it's a loss rather than a gain. And duck-billed platypus. You can imagine getting an animal like this. It has a bill like a duck, a beaver like a tail, hair like a bear, webbed feet like an otter, claws like a reptile, lays eggs like a turtle, feeds its young on milk like a mammal, it makes electrical impulses, it spurs like a rooster, and poison like a snake. Okay, where on the chain are you going to put that one? What did it evolve from? It has features of the reptiles, birds, mammals. You know, I believe every time an evolutionist looks at the platypus, I think God smiles because I think He made it just for them. So, we're going to stop there. I appreciate you coming, listening to the class, and I hope you enjoy it. We'll pick up here next week.